Hello and welcome back. Today I want to give just a brief overview of the Expert Advisor and just explain some of the things that you'll see on the chart when it's applied and how we can interpret those. So just going to start off with go to template that we've stored in a previous tutorial, demo 1. Give it a second to apply that and you get the various lines appearing as we did before in the previous tutorial. Now there's a few key features that we need to highlight. Firstly, I think if we look over to the top left corner, we've got obviously the chart that MetaTrader itself prints, copyright information. There's an expiry date. In this particular instance, it's going to expire in a couple of days time. This is just a demo account that I'm using. Tells you the current spread for the particular instrument, so this is the euro dollar and it's kind of got a 1.3 or 4 thereabouts spread pips. Bias type, it just shows your bias that you've set to determine whether your EA draws supply or demand zones, and I'll come back to that in more detail at a later stage. And then underneath you have some trend indicators. Now each one of these correlates to a different time frame. So you have the monthly, weekly, daily, H4, hourly, 30 minute, 15 minute, 5 minute, 1 minute. And the letter straight after the colon is the trend, so either U for up or D for down. So month 1, monthly it's down. So we look at the monthly chart, say that yep, there's a very different downtrend. Weekly, however, is up. And that's because you can see there's this powerful move up here, so it's interpreted that as a change to an upwards trend. That doesn't necessarily mean you should always buy, but at the moment it's considered an upward trend as far as this EA is considered. Let's look at one more. The daily is also considered up. So here you can see it's just moving up. And yes, it has a bit of a down move here, but as far as the EA is concerned, it is still technically up. It has a very particular way of determining trend. I don't want to go into that detail at the moment, but yeah, that's one reason why we're able to program this EA in such a way, is because it has a very unique way of identifying what the current trend is. Okay, now we get onto some of the lines on the chart. You'll see there's a couple of types of lines. We have these dashed lines here. It's in different colours, green, red, blue. If you go to the smaller time frames, you get some orange ones and some purple ones as well, and some magenta ones down here. Now each colour represents a different time frame. So talking about monthly, go to the monthly chart so you can see that. You have a green line, a green dashed line. The weekly it's blue, for the daily it's red. For the H4 chart it's a purple colour, for H1 it's magenta, for M30 it's orange, there's your orange, for M15 it's green, and I've turned M5 off though it is actually a turquoise colour blue. There it is, see it down the bottom. So what do these dashed lines actually mean? I'll come to the monthly to keep it simple. Effectively, these are what we call trend directional lines. And what they say is that if a candle closes on the opposing side of this line, then the trend is also changing. So the moment, we know the month trend is down, but if the month candle closes above this line, then the EA considers the trend to have changed and then to be in an upward direction. The same applies for different time frames. So here is an interesting one. The daily trend is currently up. However, the candle here is gone below this line. It hasn't closed yet, so the trend change hasn't happened at the moment. However, if it were to remain below this line at the end of the day and close below it, then the EA would consider the trend on the daily chart to have changed from up to down. So that's what all these dashed lines are. Here we have the weekly one. See, it's showing an uptrend because there's been no close below that. Weekly uptrend. The 30-minute one is quite down here, so again we're in a downtrend here, because there's no close above that line at the moment. As soon as a new candle closes above that line, trend will be up. Next things we look at are these pairs of lines. We have a solid line with a dotted line, and these are there to represent zones, as we call them. Effectively they are the supply or demand zones. So when the solid line is below the dashed line, it's a supply zone. If the solid line is above the dashed line, it's a demand zone. Supply zones always occur above current price. Demand zones always occur below current price. In this case, price actually inside the zone, but it hasn't yet broken the bottom level, so the zone is still valid and it's still being shown on the chart. Okay, so what do the zones actually represent? Well, quite simply, they represent a change in direction of price. Effectively, that's when we believe that supply and demand balance has changed. So instead of buyers being in control, the sellers are in control. And all this is doing is marking the swing points in the chart, and based on the calculations EA does to tell you exactly at what point that imbalance has changed. And in itself is simple enough. The fact that it does it for all time frames is also relatively simple. However, what we can do is then, once we have these zones, which we can use for defining entries into low risk or well defined risk entries when we buy or sell the currency pair, what we can also do is show these zones from different time frames on the same chart. So if I come up to here, we've got a few display features. So display time frames, parent only. Let's say we want to go to a lower time frame, the hourly, but we want to see the zones for the daily as well. Here, parent with daily. Let's refresh. Now this is the daily, so you don't see anything but the daily. But let's suppose you go to the H4 chart, and here you see you have the zones for the daily chart superimposed on the H4 chart. There's a whole list of different options we have. We could have parent with weekly and daily. Chance to refresh. Now you get the weekly zones. Now I'm just going to quickly go back to the original setup where I just had the one chart's time frame zones shown on the chart. And what you'll notice at the front of each, where the zone first forms, you have a D or an S followed by a number. D effectively means demand, and the number is a number of times that price has closed above and then retested that zone. So here, you see it closed above and retested it once. And then right at the very end in this penultimate candle, it's retested. So it's twice it's retested, and that's what this number is telling you. Here, S1 means it's supply, and we've just had the one retest just here. Notice how it's literally just come back and tested this zone before dropping away quickly, and that's why these zones can become very powerful, especially when you're looking at them across a lot of different time frames. Now the problem we have is not so much that these aren't the right place to enter, but we need to understand the strength of the supply and demand imbalance at these zones, and this obviously changes a lot based on the surrounding price action nearby that zone. So what we need to do is somehow be able to quantify those zones and the power in order to determine the type of profit margin we can expect. And that's why we have a lot of different parameters that we can use to control which zones we use and ultimately which ones will get traded against. Now we can auto trade using this expert advisor, but I'm not going to go into that to any degree at the moment. We'll leave that for a later tutorial. What I will do is just filter down to the scroll down to the zone filtering characteristics. Let's focus on the trend for the moment, or the bias. you can have different settings of bias. For example, bias type none. So there's no bias being applied at the moment. Let's just say we only want to display demand zones. Some people might call them support zones. So we're going to have an upward bias. So set bias type manual, and we have it set to trend up. And let's see what happens when we refresh the zones. Now you can see that all the supply zones have disappeared and we're only left with demand zones on the chart. We go to the other charts. Similar thing has happened. This is how we can easily filter based on our own determination of which way we want to set our bias. Now you may have noticed there are various other settings of bias we could use. I'll just scroll down to it, see it again. So we just did a manual one there. However, you may want to stick with the bias based on the trend of a selected time frame. So here we have bias type selected time frame. At the moment it's set to weekly. Just say OK. And what we need to remember is that when we looked at this, the weekly trend was up. So we're only going to be getting demand zones again. Let's for a moment just look at taking it from the monthly. The monthly is down, so we changed it to monthly just to prove this is actually working as it's supposed to. Monthly. And we should just get supply zones being displayed. And there we go. There's a supply zone on the H4, on the daily, 30-minute, even on the 15-minute. Of course, we may not just want to specify based on a particular time frame or even a manual bias. We may want to do it based on what the higher time frame is doing. And this is where we start getting slightly more clever in terms of what we can do. So here we have bias type select time frame. Let's change that to bias type higher time frame. Now here we're on a 15-minute chart. The higher time frame by default is M30, however we've overridden it to be 1 hour in a high time frame overrides factor parameter. So M15 maps to H1, so the higher time frame for that is 1 hour, the 1 hour chart. So we look up here, we can see that the 1 hour chart is down, and this is why we only see supply zones shown here. Let's take a different one. We know that the daily will map to the weekly, so weekly is up, therefore on the daily we should only be seeing demand zones, and there you go. Let's do one more. Where does the 1 hour chart map to? So the 1 hour chart maps to the daily. By default it goes to H4, but I've overridden it and sent it to the daily. So the daily chart is showing an uptrend. We can just confirm that because this hasn't closed below this TDL line. If we go to 1 hour, we can get demand zones, which again is exactly true. So that's just one way in which we can use these parameters to control how zones work, or how they're displayed on charts, and how we can filter them out. There's actually a whole list of different parameters, and this is a rapidly increasing number of parameters as we start analysing what's actually impacting price movement and the strength of zones. And that's what's really good about this Expert Advisor, is it's very expandable. It's a tool. It's not just there to automatically trade and make you lots of money. It's there to help you learn about price action, and there to help you learn how to minimize your risk, how to get great entries, and to understand really how price actually works and moves. So I hope that's given you a little bit of understanding, and we'll start moving into a little bit more detail about some of these other parameters in the next tutorial. Thank you, see you later.